You go to work. It's 8 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock, wherever you go to work. And you begin to do your coding. You're coding away. You're getting your test to pass. You're adding more code. You're getting your test to pass. It's 5 o'clock. It's time to go home. All your tests are passing. You go home feeling pretty good. You come in the next morning and all your tests are broken. What happened? Somebody stayed later than you and checked code in on top of yours and broke it. Maybe they live in a different country. So now you have to work all day to get your stuff to work again. You go home, you come back the next day, and it's all broken again. How many times can you go around that loop? Right? This is a common problem of large teams. When you have large teams, we tend to step on each other. This is an old problem. It's been around for decades, and there are two fundamental solutions to it. Both of these solutions were invented by the telephone companies because they're the first ones who had the problem. And the first solution is the weekly build. We're going to allow all our programmers to ignore each other for 4 days. They'll all check out the code into their own little sandboxes. They'll all make whatever changes they want to make and run all their tests for 4 days. And then on Friday, we will all get together and we'll integrate. This is the weekly build. And it works just fine until we get to the point where integration starts to take a little bit longer than Friday. As the system gets more and more complicated, it takes longer and longer to integrate. And so then we've come in on a couple of Saturdays, and we don't like that. Somebody gets the bright idea that we should start integrating on Thursday afternoon. And now we have set the line of integration into motion. That line will continue to move. It'll move to Thursday morning, and then it'll move to Wednesday afternoon. It'll move to Wednesday at noon. And about when it gets to Wednesday at noon, and our duty cycle is now 50%, someone will get the bright idea that, oh, you know what, we should do a bi-weekly build. Build once every 2 weeks. That'll give us a week and a half of development and a half a week of integration. But the line of integration continues to move until it gets to late Friday of the first week. And someone says, oh, this is awful. We're integrating just as much as we're developing. Let's integrate once every month. I worked for a telecommunications company. I consulted for a telecommunications company in Canada, which had gotten to the point where they were having a monthly integration cycle. And it was so painful for them that they decided that they were going to stop developing, and for 3 months, they would break the dependencies in their component structure and reorganize their software so that they could use the second traditional approach. The second traditional approach is very simple. Organize your components so that there are no cycles in the graph. Now, here's one that has a cycle. Right? That's a cycle in the dependency graph. Organize your components so that there are no cycles. If you do that, see if I've got a nice picture. Here we go. If you do that, if your components have no cycles, then you can play the following game. The guys working on the alarm component, that's a team, the alarm team. And there's the conveyor team and the elevator team. These guys are all working on their components. The alarm guys managed to finish a release first, their 1.0 release, which they put in a directory called Alarm 1.0, and they sent an email to everybody else saying, hey, Alarm 1.0 is ready, everybody can use it. The alarm team then starts to work on 1.1. Meanwhile, conveyor and elevator are happy because they just got the release of Alarm 1.0. They can start calling it now. They start calling it. They're starting to release their 1.0 versions, which another week later they will do. And when they release their versions, they'll put them in special directories, and they will send email up the stream so that the transport guys can call them. Meanwhile, Alarm is working on 1.2, elevator is working on 1.1, transport's working on 1.0, and this whole wave of development propagates up the tree. And it's very nice because you're never dealing with something that's changing. These guys working on their 1.1 are depending on Alarm 1.0. These guys are making the 1.1 changes in a completely different place. So you don't have the fight. This only works, however, if there are no cycles. Now along comes one guy, one poor schmuck. And he does that. Poor guy, he's working in the alarm component, and somebody tells him he's got to print a message on the console, and he goes up here, he sees a function. Oh, yeah, there's a print on the console, and he calls it. And now there's a cycle in the dependency graph. Perfectly innocent thing to do. All he did was call a function. But now, Conveyor would like to do their 1.3 release. In order to do their 1.3 release, they need Alarm 1.3. But Alarm 1.3 needs Control Panel 1.3, which needs Transport 1.3, which needs Conveyor 1.3, which is the one we're trying to release. So all this code is now checked out into one place, and everybody's modifying at the same time, and they're all stumbling all over each other, breaking each other's code. As soon as that cycle goes in, you have to check it all out together. There's no way to check it out independently. Part of being able to independently deploy is to be able to independently develop. Even if you never independently deploy your components, you still want to be able to independently develop them. But the problem is actually much worse than that. The elevator guys are ready to run their unit tests. But they find that when they want to run their unit tests, they need to include Alarm. That doesn't disturb them so much. But Alarm wants Control Panel, which wants Revenue, which wants the database. The database has been broken for 6 months. Nobody understands why. And it takes 45 minutes to just load the doggone thing. These guys can't run their unit tests, and they're pretty upset about it. And they find out eventually the reason they can't run their tests is because some poor guy down here made that relationship, and they find him, and they take him out back, and they beat the crap out of him. I was that guy, by the way. This is how I learned that lesson. Right? Don't do this. Now, how do you deal with this? Well, it's real easy to deal with this. You get a tool. There are dozens of these tools out there. You can find them all over the place that will tell you if you've got any cycles in the graph. Visual Studio almost does this for you because it won't let you have cycles in some parts of the system. You probably want a little bit better than that, but you can get a tool like ndepend or something like that, or if you're in Java, jdepend, or any of the other dependency trackers, and you can find these backwards relationships, and then you break them by employing the dependency inversion principle. What's really going on here is some class in here is depending on some class in here. Well, we know we can take any dependency between two classes and turn it around by sticking an interface in between them. So probably what we're going to do is use a dependency inversion approach or pull that whole function out into its own component. Take the display out of the control panel, just rip it out, and call it from both Alarm and from Control Panel. Either of those two approaches will work. It's trivial to do as long as you don't let it get away from you. So as soon as a cycle is detected, you rip a new component out or you put an interface in and turn a dependency around. One of the two. And you wind up with nice acyclic structures that you can develop independently. This is the dependency inversion approach here, where the control panel now depends on some interface, and the Alarm implements that interface. So the control panel and the display work differently.